Hello and welcome to the Echo Chamber podcast. My name is Tony Groves, and today I'm 1/3 of what is probably going to be a huge departure for some of our listeners, if not, and definitely an awkward one for Martin, I'd imagine. Remember, folks, the Echo Chamber podcast is a free-flowing conversation that may occasionally touch on mature subjects. As always, I'm joined by my co-host, Martin McMahon. Martin, you scrubbed up lovely this evening.
Yeah. Well, I knew I was coming in meeting Labour royalty, and you just have to do the right thing.
We are delighted to be joined in the Tortoise Shack by trade unionist, SIPTU worker, Labour National Executive Member, defender of the badge, stirrer of pots, and despite what you've heard, not a bad guy, Paddy Cole. Hi Paddy, great to have you in the podcast.
Thank you very much, Tony. I hope I'm not to be confused with the jazz singer, because usually everywhere I turn up there's a disappointment that I'm not actually the jazz singer.
Oh, we just have a natural disappointment. No, look Paddy, I do appreciate you coming in, and I do want to say before we even kick off that we've had many a little verbal joust online, but we've always managed to show one another respect, and I respect that you came here because it says something for people who have listened to the podcast, been supporters of the podcast, and understood that we've still been kicking cans around in this little room of ours. So it's appreciated.
Yeah. Thanks for coming in, Paddy.
Yeah, thanks very much, lads, and also to Martin. Martin, we had an interaction there a couple of years ago where you honoured your bet when I was actually right when the general election would be called, and I think that was our kind of our last interaction together. So we had to meet you in person.
We had a little bet online about election results, and Paddy won, and it was just donate to the it was your cause. You picked the cause. Which cause you
was it? Peter McVerry. More than Peter McVerry.
Can't remember.
Anyway, something to do with homelessness.
Look, it was a good cause.
And we're still,
it was popular,
and we're still talking about what. but listen, going back over obviously, like Paddy, you're here. You're a Labour member, and as I did say, defender of the badge, because honestly, it can't be an easy place since the last number of years. What are we looking? What do you think is going to happen with Labour in 2018?
Well, I think it's undeniable that we're in a very, very tough space. I think a lot of the things that have happened over the last number of years have caused people to be very, very cynical of politics, very, very cynical of what can be done by a Social Democratic Party. And it's, the general election of 2016 was gut-wrenching for Labour Party members across the country, where we saw the vote completely collapse. There's been a renewal or a rebuilding process that's happened over the last 2 years, where we've tried to address some of the more democratic deficits that we had in the party over the last number of years, and we just have to try and continue that work into 2018. Look to build alliances with people on the left, people that are in the trade union movement, people in the NGO sector, people that are working day in, day out, trying to house people or trying to help people that are in homeless services, or people that are, really struggling to get by. So it's a big task. I don't think that it's going to be easy, but to be a member of the Labour Party in good times or bad is definitely not for the faint-hearted, and it's something that I think, particularly over the last year, if you look at our parliamentary record in what Brendan Howlin and Jan O'Sullivan have called a do-nothing Dáil, I think we've really reaffirmed and repositioned ourselves as a party that will be pushing a more trade union angle, a workers' rights angle, and I think that's something that can only be seen to be positive and something to build on for the next couple of years, because I don't think, as much as people are talking about a general election this year, I don't actually think that we're going to have something this side of the budget. I think we're going to get through the budget, and that gives us another 9 months to try and rebuild further, to try and build stronger links in communities that we've been doing over the last year and a half. So we're prepared to go into a general election campaign with something to offer to people, and hopefully something that will be an alternative to the Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael kind of hegemony.
I love your optimism, but I don't see the election getting past the budget, because basically the budget's going to be quite a giveaway budget if they do get there. But what I will say is, it strikes me as someone, you're a young man who's trying to, talk about building community activism and building grassroots and building through the trade union movement. My charge against Labour, Pete, would be that they lost their way in a corporatised almost way, where it became. They lost what that means in terms of the. I don't want to say that the party of Connolly and Larkin and we go down that road, but we can't. But at the same time, they lost that. People say they were out of touch. I would say they were probably more in touch with corporatism than they were with democracy.
As a party, the structures of the party. There was certainly an element of the party where we had where we felt like there was PR before we had a strategic communications unit. Well, Tony, I don't think I think everything you said there. There's a lot of it that I agree with. I think when you're the second largest party in the country, if we're talking about the general election of 2011, you have far more quote unquote professional staff at your disposal. And I think when you have that amount of professional staff at your disposal, something goes amiss when it comes to listening to the opinions and concerns of the membership. I think the Labour Party, throughout that period, there was a lot of members that were actually very, very vocal about the direction that the party was taking. But I think, and this is only what I think now, it's my only kind of personal opinion, is that the leadership of the party closed ranks. They saw the potential devastation that was going to be happening in the economy, and people can argue that did happen despite the Labour Party's efforts, and they did close ranks to try and get us through the worst of the economic downturn. And I think members' voices were excluded from that process, and that's something, as I say, one of the benefits, and it's every cloud has a silver lining, really. And when you have the tide going out in you as dramatically as it did in 2016, the only people that are left in the party are the people that actually believe in the core Labour values and the core Labour principles that got us through over 100 years of our existence. And that's one thing that I'll say about what happened in 2016, that it did kind of clear the decks of kind of the professional kind of element of the party that weren't actually listening to what everyday trade unionists, environmentalists, like liberals, social democrats in the party at a grassroots level were saying. So that's one positive that I'd say about what did happen in 2016, and something that we're trying to build into 2018.
I know, and you and I, Tony, have we have talked about Labour, and we hold differing positions, and Tony has given you what I'd call the soft position Labour. I'll give you the hard position Labour. The hard position. You know I'm going to say this, Paddy. Labour sold out. Bottom line, Labour sold out. And Labour need to end. It's not should they or will they. It is they need to. And I'll tell you why they need to. Fianna Fáil fucked this country from a height. Went into opposition, has sat there, and without any great effort on their part, is now in contention again as the second biggest party in the country. Probably, come election time, neck and neck with Fine Gael. Now, they should have been devastated. For what they did to this country, they should have been devastated. Now, that's the country as a whole.
I totally agree with you.
Now, Labour come along, and Labour's position is, we'll stop the worst excesses of Fine Gael. And that was their entire thing for going into election, or into government. At the time, I sat there, and from a totally observer point of view, I think an absolutely stupid move. Sit in opposition for 6 months. Fine Gael won't be able to do anything on their own, and as an opposition party, Labour grows because it was proper opposition. But no, what happened was what I call the opportunist Labours. Now, you're proper And you'll excuse me for saying, you're a proper bearded lefty. You're a proper bearded lefty.
It's an understrap.
But you are a proper bearded lefty. And you know I respect you as a lefty. You are definitely a proper bearded lefty. But those who hold positions of influence at the top of the party and their advisors, they're not lefties. They're not even close to lefties. Not even close. So, do Labour deserve the wrath that has been put on them? Absolutely. 100%. When you look at their record in government, they started out with the medical cards and attacked who had to be the most vulnerable people in this country with aplomb. They went, it would never have happened if Fine Gael had been on their own. And those who were sent out to defend it, when they cut the lone parents, which is predominantly women. And it was like, well, we'll starve women back into work. It's like, the ones who were sent out to defend that were Labour women. I could not get over it. It wasn't Fine Gael people sent out to defend the most abominable measures. It was Labour women who stood up. And it should have been Labour women who were pulling it down. But no, there is this set which has gotten into Labour, and it's epitomised by the likes of Populist Watch, this affluent set who are really hard right, who think they have a social conscience. Well, bollocks to them. You're not left. You're not close to left. It's people like you who should be in charge of the party. And I don't mean it as candidates, but the direction of the party. Ye are Blair Labour. That's what ye are. Which is not Labour at all. It is a centre-right party, and it absolutely devastated society in this country. Devastated.
I think we need to give Paddy a right to respond.
Oh,
to that.
yeah,
That's quite
go
a,
ahead.
that's quite
I
a
was
terrain,
good.
Martin.
And I do, I appreciate a lot of stuff that Martin said, and I understand your frustration. I know that it comes from a good place, because a lot of people that are very, very disappointed about the Labour Party's time in government, a lot of it is coming from the right place, and you said before, I remember.
Well, I have voted Labour quite a lot.
Yeah, and you were talking.
Past.
Yeah, and you were talking about your grandfather being a true Labour man. And I've listened to that as well. And the people that I want to talk to as a Labour Party member, and someone that sits on the executive, are people that fell out with us over our time in government. But I want to go back to a couple of things that you said. You said we sold out. Okay, now I don't believe that we sold out, right? Now, because there's two sides to that. There's another half of the story. You're talking about the worst successes of Fine Gael. What do the worst successes of Fine Gael actually mean? I'll tell you what they mean. Because I read the 2011 manifesto. And the 2011 manifesto said, quite simply, that they would increase taxes by 27%, and they would cut spending by 73%, and they would get to 3% of the deficit target by 2014, which essentially means an extra $2 billion worth of cuts. I
do remember that they were of the mindset that you rip the Band-Aid off in one fell swoop, as opposed to what we ended up with, death by 1,000 cuts.
Well, death by 1,000 cuts is it's certainly a perspective.
Go on. Paddy, don't mean to be attacking you, but that's a phrase.
No, and there were some devastating cuts, and some cuts that were absolutely gutting for like a Labour Party member to have to go through, and I can cite numerous of examples of the cuts that were made. But there's also, on the flip side of that, when we talk about the Fine Gael manifesto, what they wanted to do, they essentially wanted to sell off the family silver, 10 billion worth of state assets. Now, if somebody wants to sell off 10 billion of state assets in a depressed economy in 2011, you're talking about our ports, you're talking about our airports, you're talking about the land around our hospitals that if we had a centre-left government we'd be able to build houses on. You're talking about just about everything that we had in the country. With the Labour Party and our forests, another campaign that I was a part of to try and save our forests, the Quilcha lands, that had a big broad-based campaigning team around it that actually stopped that from happening. Like, that's the reality of what Fine Gael had in store for people, and they came within a whisper of having that majority, and that's something that the Labour Party prevent it from happening. Now, I know it's very difficult to be able to say as an argument, you know, we prevented something from happening. But ask the public servants that didn't lose their job, that Fine Gael had earmarked to lose their jobs, whether or not the Labour Party made a difference in government. Ask the 330,000 people that were taken out of universal social charge, or the people that had their minimum wage increased when we got into government. Ask them if they made a difference for the Labour Party in government. And that's the whole thing. We were the Labour Party in government, and just like, because you had a run on it there, Martin, so just let us come back in here. The Labour Party were a part of a government. The problem I think that we had when we were in a coalition with Fine Gael is that we started off trying to balance the government. And if you look at expenditure versus tax increases, they had 73 against 27. By the end of the lifetime of the Fine Gael Labour coalition, it was 50-50. We essentially did balance that government. Now, I know there's painful cuts. I know there was a lot of things that we did get wrong, mistakes we made, but we did balance out what they had. And now we're in a position where the next government that comes in, and hopefully, and I hope I'm wrong about there's no election this year, because I personally would love to get out on the doors, and I'd love to have another go at it after 2016, because that is something that grassroots Labour activists really want to get out and actually try and fight the good fight again. And we're determined to make sure that the 7 is doubled in the next Dáil. And people think that, you know, we could be crazy thinking that, but that's something that we're really, really looking forward to. Or, you know, trying to look forward to. I don't think anyone really enjoys general elections if you're, you know, knocking on doors. Sadomasochists in us, like, a little bit, like, you know. But, like, you know, getting back to your question there on the lone parents, and that's something that I know the Spark campaign ran a fantastic campaign, like actually showing the devastation that this was happening to people, and it's, you know, and they still do. Yeah, well, they had a conference in Liberty Hall, I think, a couple of months ago that was very well attended, and they have very, very serious grievances. But I would say, in the defence of the Labour Party in that particular scenario, is that you did say that it was women predominantly women that were predominantly affected. Women going back into work, by the very nature of it, they have precarious jobs, they're on low pay. The Labour Party, when we were in government, did set up the Low Pay Commission in order to be able to act as a bulwark against low pay, and I try and you know give advice to government in order to be able to increase minimum wages and identify if and when contracts and 0 hour contracts and things like that. And you know, the Labour Party, for me, is a party of work, and it's a party of, you know, if a woman is in a position where the youngest child is 7 years of age and in school, well, I don't think that, you know, a woman should be, or a father, or stay-at-home father, should be in a position where they are in essentially what is a poverty trap, if you include rent allowance and things like that, until the child is 18. I'm not saying starve people into work or anything like that, because that's not, I think, the kind of the aspiration of that particular job activation measure that John did bring in. Like, you know, I don't think it's as simple as trying to starve people out of work. It's trying to get people to a position where they can think about building a career for themselves.
There was one problem, Martin, and it was the DSP. I got a report in advance of that saying that this was one of the effects of this was that it was going to actually make some working parents, single parents, worse off and force them. So it wasn't. So they did have advice not to do that actual.
Well, Tony cites this quite a lot, that Fine Gael only care about 36% of the electorate. That's all they care about. Now, my view on Labour, where Labour is right now, Labour only care about their vote, which is predominantly a union vote. It's predominantly a union vote. But even within that, they only care about older members, because younger members like teachers, nurses, all across the board, they got a kick in the bollocks, where those at the top are. We now have this two-tier system that exists within teaching, within other occupations within the system. We've never seen workers' rights so on the floor as they are now. And whilst they are great for union members, and they have remained great for union, particularly those at the top of the scale, for the ordinary worker and for the lower paid worker who is unionised, their conditions are awful.
Well, I suppose on the two-tier thing, Paddy, like, it's only fair that you get right to reply again, you know?
Yeah, well, the two-tier system in the public service is something that was actually enforced by a previous Fianna Fáil government. Now, the last public service stability agreement, that awful word that's used, it's like the N word really, like about government and generally in political discourse. There is a mechanism in that to try and move towards pay equalisation in the public service, but it can only be done through dialogue, and it is something that, like, my own wife's a teacher, and I understand from like her perspective on what's happening in the public service, that there is a two-tier system, and you know, the best thing that people can do in order to be able to get that equalised, and Martin is right, like, trade union members are on better terms and conditions. What I would say to those people would be to get active, to, you know, go to get the conferences, to put it onto the floor of their conferences, and actually fight from within the union to make this a number one priority. That's the only way things actually do change in trade union structures, is when there's a critical mass of people coming from below to demand that this change is made. Now, you're talking about workers' rights as well, you know, being on the floor. I think workers are starting to get a bit of confidence again, Martin, over the last few years.
I'll give you an example now. 6 months ago, CIF said that there was 3 workers for every construction job. And Lorcan Sir brought it up today, and I think we spoke about it either on the pod.
Lorcan had already identified that there was going to be a labour shortage. He got shouted down by the CIF and told, mind your own business, there's no labour shortage.
Now, I have a pal, and we're adamant.
No one likes you, Martin.
We're adamant that the ERCT system is a bogus self-employment system. Adamant, and we have proved it. With Norris, we have absolutely proved it.
Yeah, I've read your work on it, like, you know, and I've read it.
We knew that the builders aren't going near the building trade because their conditions are so bad. They'd rather drive taxis. They'd rather move out. If you're a skilled labourer, you're not in this country. You're somewhere else.
Okay.
If you're borderline, I mean, they're talking about all the money is going into office building and industrial premises at the moment. That's because they're getting away with bogus self-employment, whereas the guy who has 6 guys building 10 houses on a site, he won't get away with it. But the bigger you are, the more chance you have of getting away with all this crap. So workers' rights are that's the prime example. We knew that. We've known for donkey's years that couriers who are all self-employed are not self-employed. We know all of this stuff. I went to Joe through Dominic Hannigan, and Dominic, and currently not an issue. Now, Labour get into opposition, all right, suddenly bogus self-employment is an issue.
Yeah, we have it on it's actually, we're the only party,
But what I'll say about Labour, Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil take big chunks. They take huge big chunks. And Labour take it back in pea-sized pieces. And you're never going to keep up with them. You're never. And historically, when you look at Labour, all Labour have really done is stop Fine Gael getting wiped out. That's all they've really done. Their entire time, I'll say from the last time when there was a butcher that led Labour, since that time, it's been these, for want of a better word, these people are using Labour as a political platform. It's not that they are Labour people. They're politicians that couldn't come through in Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael. So what's the next best thing? Well, the next best thing is Labour. And Labour, there's no real differentiation between Labour and Fine Gael. None.
Man, right, I know the man that you're talking about, Frank Lusky, and he's someone that, when I look at Labour Party people down the years, he's someone that I would look up to, and I think a lot of the work they've done with the European Poverty Network, a lot of the stuff that he would have done in the Department of Social Welfare are core Labour values.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, absolutely core Labour values, and an area that I'm particularly interested in, an area that a lot of people in the Labour Party want to move the party further to, because...
But how do you get there?
Well, see, like, that's the only way we can do it is from below, like, and actually from grassroots activism, like, within the party. Like, we are involved in a number of campaigns now at a grassroots level in the party, whether it be on homelessness, whether it be on repealing the Eighth Amendment, whether it be on workers' rights. Like, you talk about the Labour Party and having be no different than Fine Gael, right? That's a pretty serious charge, right?
It is, yeah,
it's pretty serious, right? Because in the last general election, we were the only party that had a workers' rights charter in our manifesto. We were the only party to do that. So you're saying, you know, we're not inside the world, we're not about it, you know. We were the only party to do that. No, I was there for the press launch of that. Do you know what the press actually wanted to talk about? Who was going to challenge Joan for the leadership? That's all they wanted. That's all they cared about. That did not get a paragraph. No, because I think it speaks to a wider problem. The narrative about the Labour Party, right, kicked in the day that we got into government, the day we went into government with Fine Gael. The die was cast. The smaller minority party gets wiped out. And that's a narrative that we were actually battling against for 5 years in government. The media didn't care about some of the stuff that we were doing. They didn't care about covering the workers' charter that we had in the previous general election. They didn't care about mitigating the worst successes of Fine Gael. They just made it all about a personality clash between different Labour Party members. It wasn't actually about anything that we were doing in government.
I'm actually, listen, I'm the closest thing you have to an ally in this room, Paddy. But what I'm saying, no, it's grand. Like, I'm enjoying this. Like, you know, Martin's going to give himself an aneurysm. But what I would like to see, like, but from, it's something that you said twice now. You said about building from the ground up and working within the party. It's the word within the party that's getting at me, because I want to see people broaden that out into working with the other parties. I want to see that actually say, well, here's how we're going to try and build bridges. If that's the I don't want to be emotive about it, but there certainly needs to be a framework there where there's a common ground found and that people can move forward. Because as it stands, you know, it doesn't help when the articles they're all published or anything that comes out is about internal, and when I say internal, I mean a coalition of the left looking at each other. And, you know, Martin's going to tell me that Labour aren't the left. And my fear is that, Paddy, there's no doubt you're of the left, but I'm still about the solutions. And I think the solutions lie in good people on the left. So I think that's what they need to focus on, and not this within the party, because that's another thing that bothered everybody else, is that the party loyalty, put the party in front of it.
Oh, okay, and let me just, and to a degree what you're saying, okay, Labour has a good structure.
Yeah,
So,
an important structure.
A better structure, we'll say, than other parties on the left, because the other parties on the left are far newer and they haven't had the time to build these structures. And
it's a mammoth task. So some of the stuff that is being done with our parties getting set up and all, it's a mammoth task. It's a thankless task for a lot of them as well. And it's all been relying on the spirit of voluntarism that I think our party now is trying to get back after.
But there is a good structure, and I'm not one for abandoning a structure. If the structure is there and the structure works, then you've got to envelop the structure into what you're going to do on the left in some way. But the idea that the structure and Labour have to be synonymous with each other, no, they don't have to be. The structure exists whether Labour as a party exists, as long as there's something that the structure can move to. A broad left that they're quite happy to be in that structure.
The talent is the people. The talent is the people.
Well, then Labour has go 3 X's. You're out of here. No, but what you've got at the moment, you've got Brendan, you've got Joan, you have Alan. These are all very divisive figures.
Fairness to Brendan Howland now, like if you're to pick, I think you'd struggle to find a better parliamentarian like India Oireachtas. I swear to God, like he has taken 7 TDs in the Dáil and really maximise the impact that he can have on legislation. If you look at what he did in terms of Maurice McCabe, if you look at what he's done in terms of getting motions put through on workers' rights, I think he's done a very, very, very good job at promoting Labour Party values within the very limited opposition space that he has.
Do you remember Labour of old, when the PRSI worker was getting shafted right across the board? And what happened with the PRSI payers? They marched en masse.
The tax marches?
Yeah,
What you doing a documentary about at the moment?
Behind the Labour flag.
Yeah. I saw Kluski. I was actually
Yeah.
funny that you say that. I was looking at a picture of Kluski there with some of the trade union leaders there only yesterday in 1980. Yeah,
That Labour doesn't exist anymore.
that's Martin. Like, what? How does it not exist?
At the present moment in time, the same group of people are getting hammered now as we're getting hammered then. The same group of people that are getting away with paying tax then are getting away with paying tax now. It is no different. The burden is now on the worker. Multinationals aren't paying their way.
Martin, I hate to burst your bubble, but right now today, and this is to really be from a podcast perspective, because we have to understand that Labour aren't in government right now. So we can talk about 5 years of 2011 to 2016, but we can't be attacking that decision now. What you're right about the structure, but it always reminds me of and I'm gonna again bring it back to Jack Welch, who's the CEO of all time, the greatest businessman of all time, and all that bollocksology. He bought a bank once for when he was running GE, because he thought he could conquer the world, and he didn't understand why it was losing money. And then he went and visited Wall Street to see what was going on, and he realised that the talent went up on the lift, went down the lift, and walked out the door, and went across the road and worked for the other bank. What we have is a need for that those talented people across the spectrum to work out what is the best solutions, and if it's the labour network that helps to get certain ideas across.
Now you're sort of getting to where I'm coming from.
No, I'm not,
As
though,
a
because
network,
you're
it
telling me
works.
that the brand is toxic, and I'm telling you every brand is just every brand is sitting on a shelf, and it depends on what it stands for. At the moment, I don't think it's a brand that's going to be. It's not very saleable, but it's certainly not.
Well, you listen to the commentators on mainstream media, and they're telling you, look, the only game in town here is Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, and they're telling you this is the only game in town. Now, they said the same in Spain, and they've said the same in other countries, and when it comes from out of the blue, and they don't see it coming. Now, this country is not that far off that position. The more your inequality increases, the more chance you have of reaching that crux point where people say, well, look, fixing politics in Ireland, we've got to stop putting these two gobshites, punishing one by putting the other, and you're not punishing either of them. Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael are not getting punished by swapping them around at Lanigan's Ball. That's not punishing them, not in the least bit. The only way to punish them is not vote for them.
I totally agree with you, and unfortunately, that's the challenge that we have, and I think it's a challenge as people that are on the progressive left have to try and come to terms with. And I include Sinn Féin in that as well. I'm not one of these kind of people that don't see a role for Sinn Féin. I don't see them. I don't like the word populist and all of that. But I think if we're trying to build a progressive alternative to the Fianna Fáil Fine Gael hegemony, we really do need to start answering the real big questions of our time and move away from kind of personality driven politics, clickbait kind of politics, and actually try and create a vision for what an alternative would look like, what a Labour economy would look like, what a progressive economy would look like, and take these bastards on. Because if you look at it, when we got in on our best day in 2011, over 60% of people still voted for parties that would have the rich contribute absolutely nothing to the recovery of the country. That's a massive amount of people. We got 20% on our best day, which is now down to, we're at our, I think we're in the earth core of our vote now at the moment as things are going at the moment. But the Labour Party, and you kind of, something like that you said earlier on, that we take bits back bit by bit. We take bits back from the main right wing parties. But if you look at traditionally the Labour Party, we only ever get 10% of the vote, but we seem to get 100% of the blame on things that go wrong. And as well, right? You did say that we are there just essentially to prop up Fine Gael, right?
Yes.
I would argue that we've only ever been in government when the country has gone to shit, or when Fianna Fáil have have made an absolute bags of the country, or when in '92 when we got in on the back of the Charlie Haughey debacle, which was I know we had the Mary Robinson victory in 1990, but it's we're never in government on our own terms. Like
But that's
we're never in.
that's because Labour have never had the moxie to sit in opposition for long enough to make it a decent opposition.
Man, right. At the end of the day, we were faced with a choice. I personally think, as a trade unionist and as a progressive, that the left have to make a decision. That are you going to use the mandate to defend working people? Are you going to try and capitalise on their misfortune and capitalise on their pain? You say that we would have had them out in 6 months.
Yeah.
I don't think so. I really, really don't
There's
think
no
so.
way they could have sold what they were doing. There is no way they could have sold what they were doing on their own to the Irish. Like, you saw what happened. Even when they had Labour on board over water.
I don't think they ever had Labour on board over water now, in fairness.
Well, Labour were vociferous in introducing the water, just as vociferous as Fine Gael were. And I don't want to go down the alleyway of water. There was a load. There was the shopping list of stuff. And I mean,
What's
really,
what's the shopping list?
He's talking about Tesco.
The Tesco ad.
the Tesco.
The Tesco ad, I think, was probably the greatest piece of political marketing in the history of the state, because everybody remembers it.
Yeah.
What I would say about the Tesco ad and the context in which it was put out there, we were in a position. Now, I wasn't at the top of the party. I didn't see the Tesco ad until it actually appeared in the paper myself. So I saw it. Thought it was a good ad. I was like, we're putting that out there. Make sure we can stick to that. And I think that had an impact in the last few days of the election, because 25% of people that did vote for the Labour Party did make up their mind over those 3 days, and we deprived Fine Gael of an overall majority. We did. There's no question about that. 25% of people that voted for the Labour Party voted from the last 3 days of that election. We did deprive them of a majority. They were really, really motoring. The right-wing media, since we went to 33%, really, really, really went after us, because the right-wing media understands
Where their bread is buttered.
where their bread is
But
buttered.
I think the media is kind of, and still is, kind of very favourable to Labour. Very favourable. I don't think that Labour would get...
Let's just finish this part. Right?
Yeah,
Let's
yeah.
just finish the Tesco ad. We're still in the Tesco ad, right? So, the Fine Gael people that are at the top of that party are very, very serious people. I wouldn't, they saw that as an absolute affront to them, depriving them of that majority, and we were held. There was a ransom that we gave them, a ransom note to say, this is how you destroy our party. This is how you actually go after us. And they picked those items then to actually just. And you can argue that we should have went further on water. We should have went further on the child benefit cut. We should have went further on the
But
increase in VAT.
I think that's all even aiming. I think that's all bottom. That's the low hanging fruit. It's the big stuff. The guy, Tony's world, it's that world that remains untouched. The people who actually fucking buried the country remained untouched.
I have to say, Martin, when you refer to my world, as you so lovingly put it, and sneer at me as you say it, yeah.
There's a hand gesture going on here.
The truth of that matter, the truth of it is that I've been saying it for ages. And the worst thing that happened in the UK was Sir Fred Goodwin became Fred Goodwin. The worst that happened in Ireland is that lads dusted down expressions of deep regret and said we were very sorry. And today, I said to you, Martin, 4 months ago that the tracker scandal
Wasn't over, yeah.
And I said, what did I say? It hit 40,000.
Yeah, you did, yeah.
They added we were at 33,000 at the start of the week, and we've added 4,000 since. So I'm getting there, and I hate to say that I'm getting there, because that just means that 40,000 people were
Didn't the
deprived.
central bank come out today with sort of, well, in the future we'd like to make individuals responsible for.
Yeah, you see, and that was what I said as well a few months ago, if you remember, because I said the statute of limitations, the 6 years, and the change of the rules that when these things were discovered, when they happened. At the time, the central bank had maximum fines of like 1.5 million or something. So they're going like, oh, it happened in that time period. So that was the legislation as of that time. I was, and I know that they knew in 2008, but they're saying they only found out in 2011. So, and the central bank also leaked the story last week. And I say leaked because I fully believe that they leaked it, because they said, oh, someone got minutes from a meeting to show that they admonished each other, that they sat around and said, naughty. But they wanted that.
Leaked it to the business.
No, you're a bold boy. No, you're a bold boy.
And they leaked. I've no doubt they've leaked that intentionally on the basis of trying to rebuild public faith in in that they're actually, oh look, they're taking this matter seriously. I'm sorry, but you know, anybody who knew over the last number of years that this was going on and didn't decide to lift the lid, or more importantly, the people who only 9 months ago said, and this is what they said, we're going to give the banks time to come back to us. We're going to, 3 times they said, we're waiting for them we're giving them their internal process, and the banks kept coming back going, yeah, we've only got this handful of them. And they kept, anybody who let that go should be let go.
Well, and I'm going to go sort of on a tangent here at the moment. Nama Wine Lake is revealed.
Great work.
Oh yeah, well we love Nama Wine Lake, and if you're out there, Nama Wine Lake, we'd have you on here any day of the week. We'll do your voice change. We'll anonymise the whole thing. We'd love to have you on. But Nama Wine Lake reported from the commission where they're investigating by Maurice McCabe, and a whole pile of documents turned up this week that had been excluded, not just 1 or 2, from the Gardaí and from the Department of Justice. Now this is very much like it's a different subject, but to the tracker markets, things that
they were supposed to be given under full disclosure that have only been disclosed now. And I don't know if you've seen some of it, Paddy. It's fairly explosive stuff.
Oh yeah, like when you say how long will this government last, that's it. I know it's.
Well, to chart this is the little thing. Well, this isn't a little thing, but it's a massive thing. But it could be the unknown that causes it. And what I will say about the Disclosures Tribunal, again, not to bring everything back to the Labour Party, but Brendan Howell did bring in the Disclosures Act of 2014.
We'll give you that.
And a lot of the work that has been done.
You just reminded me of Paddy when he was plugging everything on the show. Do you remember?
Right. But also, and a lot of because I listened to the podcast and I'm a fan of the podcast, and I think a lot of what what happened from 2008 to 2011, maybe 2007 to 2008, if there had been more of this, more people having these discussions honestly and openly and putting them out there and giving people platforms to have alternative points of view, because there was that whole Tina kind of, it's like an analogy that there is no other alternative to this. And I think citizen radio, I think citizen press and activism press and podcasts and whatever else you have makes a real contribution to society. So it's a pity that this stuff wasn't around 7 or 8 years ago, and the technology's there, and I'd encourage other people to do it as well. But getting as well, because a very good podcast that I listened to belong to yourself was from Ken Fox.
I was going to bring that up,
and I think he's he's a very, very diligent journalist. And again, the Freedom of Information Act is something. It's a cultural thing, and it's a small thing, and it's not as kind of sexy as child benefit and things like that. But it is something that the Labour Party has always been standing for, is transparency in public life. And when we're talking about Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael and that hegemony, the corruption, the planning, all of that kind of things, one thing I'm very, very proud of as being a Labour Party member is that we were never caught with our hands in the tail on any of those types of things, and it's something that can't be charged.
Now the cynic in me looks at you and goes, "Yeah, never caught."
Yeah.
His money was only resting in my account.
Okay.
Can you give us that, man?
No, I do.
Can I say something though? What the Ken Fox then on the flip side said, that I actually think it was Brendan Howland who introduced, and it was to protect whistleblowers.
Yeah.
And then Fine Gael jumped on that cynically and used that bill to hide their expenses, if you remember. So like
Well, I would have said I'm very cynical. I say it was engineered that way from the get-go.
Well, Ken says it wasn't, and I have to tell you, Martin, if Ken had proof that it was engineered that way, he'd put it into the public domain. There's no question. But so right, I don't want to keep. I'm not going to keep picking the scabs here and going that route, because what I really would love to see is that when we get positive about what we're going to do, we want to be solutions orientated. You've talked about housing. Look, is it okay to let the listeners know that you're expecting a baby in the next couple of weeks?
27th.
So
same day as a Labour Trade Unionist conference that I won't be able to attend. I'm just telling people that now.
But like so bringing a baby into the world, Paddy. It's a big thing now. What are we going to do solution wise? Housing.
Actually, if you think about it now, even abstractly, and I don't mean just your baby, but any baby born this year, we'll say, what's their chances of a house of good active participation in it, a good employment market where they have security of tenure. What are their, particularly in Ireland, are we looking at it just, I mean, your generation, slightly younger than you, the young generation that's all emigrated now, they're, as we were told, Simon said,
Paddy's in the worst generation. In
your generation is tiny.
25 to 35 are the first generation worse off statistically than their
And you're a
parents.
tiny number of people compared to the generation that's gone before you.
Yeah.
So you're going to be fighting it your entire life, but the kids that are coming out now, they have, I mean, they're entering a world where a minibus full of people has more wealth than the rest of the entire population of the world. We're in this really crazy situation, and I mean, it has to be worrying for every parent now. How's my child ever going to afford a house? How's my child ever going to live, any normal, decent kind of life, particularly in Ireland? How is it going to happen?
Well, it's far like you have a kid on the way and all. That's great, but I think it's the problem is far more immediate than that. Like I was talking to Tony earlier on, and I was saying that, when I was 18, 19, I was able to go from kind of job to job. There was loads of jobs. I was able to live out of home. I was like living the life of Riley. I lived in Marlborough Street, just off O'Connell Street there, paying 350, maybe 375 euros a month on a 1-bedroom like apartment above a jeweller's. It was unbelievable the type of lifestyle that I was able to enjoy as a 21 year old. And I fast forward that to my brother now, who's 25, who has a good job, still living with my ma, is going to Australia now in April because he wants to try and go over there, work, get a deposit, and then come back essentially to the unknown. Now, I want to live in a society where my brother can come home, where he can get a house, where he can put down roots in his community. So it's far more immediate than, 20 years time when my kid is like coming of age or, looking to buy a house. Chances are they'll be still living with me till if the housing crisis isn't fixed, they'll probably be living with me till they're 60, But
do you know when you look back down the pipe and you look at what's the really sad end of this? I have a sister, 50 years of age. She's been in England since she was 19. I have a brother who's 40 years of age. He's been in the States since he was, in and around the same age, maybe 21, 22. So every
You're the eldest.
Fuck right off. So
the eldest always the smartest.
No, I am not the. Trust me, my family no. So this has happened with sort of every generation, and there is absolutely nobody out there saying, particularly in Ireland, saying, look, we have a way to fix this. And what happens is you bleed the best leave the country. They always leave the country, the best do, and you're left with this fucking conservative little shithole on the edge of Europe that nobody gives two tosses about, who can't govern themselves. And
very optimistic.
Yeah, I'm just saying, Jesus Christ.
But that's what we have. That's what we have. And then we and people say, well, how can it be this way? Well, you keep voting Fianna Fáil. Gail, will you stop?
No, well, it comes back to again, right? We spoke to really good people in here. We've been very lucky to have good people in here, and there are solutions, there are fixes. We're 1.5 kilometers up the road. They built houses for 150.
Yeah.
So the blueprint is there. Can we build an alternative that's going to give people something to vote for? Go on. Yeah.
Look, I think the way that's going to happen, and it's happening already, and it's happening in communities across the country. Like I'm involved in the Housing and Homeless Coalition, through the Labour campaigns group that caused a lot of kind of, over the Christmas in particular, the fact that the Labour campaigns group was involved has caused a lot of controversy online. But also the My Name Is campaign that's running as well. These are community people essentially from below trying to get the mainstream media, trying to get politicians talking about the need to have decent housing provision. And there's a lot of stuff around language as well, like housing. Like, we're trying to build homes for people, we're trying to build communities for people. We're not trying to just build
Yeah, well, I've said this before. You've got to stop saying housing, start talking homes, and stop talking beds, start talking bedrooms.
Yeah. The language is very important around it because, you can almost become desensitized to, like when someone says housing, you just think of a housing estate. You don't think of the person or the people that are living there and going to school there and working there and putting down roots there. That's essentially what we want. Like, and I think the only way that we can do that is through. There's a very, very interesting Congress document, Irish Congress of Trade Unions document, that has a local authority led housing plan. Because I think that's essentially the only way that we can do it.
Is that goes back to the Kelly plan, doesn't it? It does. It takes it back to the Kelly plan.
Well, I think that the plan needs to be three ways. There needs to be local authority housing units, affordable housing, and there has to be something to deal with the homeless.
The rent.
If you can produce affordable housing, like if you produce affordable housing, because what we've had in this country, we've never had affordable housing. We've had privately built houses bought by the county council and sold to people at a discount. So they would literally go to, so you would buy below cost, and they called that affordable housing. That was the scheme that DCC used, and it wasn't actually affordable housing. It was really
discounted housing.
Discounted. So discounted just meant we take the market rate, we'll knock 18% off it. How long are you living in the area? You're down here, whatever. These are your links, and we'll knock this percentage off it. It was discounted. That's not affordable housing. Affordable housing is based on income.
Yeah.
If the average income is 40,000 multiplied by four and a half.
Well, we worked it out 150. We worked it out here before. If you're going to go on average earnings, 150 is what you need a house to cost.
Again, it's slightly more, but
we're in the ballpark.
We're in that area, and it can be done. So there. Okay, there's one myth burst. So affordable housing is possible. You need to have an affordable housing project, not an actual discounted project. And then on the flip side, and whatever about the noise going around about Labour being involved in social media campaigns and the likes of that, we all have to get by our own. Everybody has to swallow something. We all have to swallow some poison, because we have to sit around. If it meant that a voice gets heard, and two voices are heard louder, and three voices are heard even more, well, sometimes it's for the greater good, folks. And
I kind of think with housing, you know, I've said this online. You've seen I've said it online. People need to take responsibility for their vote. If you vote Fine Gael, you are voting for homelessness. Okay, you're voting for a whole raft of other things as well, but you are also responsible for homeless, and it is your responsibility. Okay, if you vote Fianna Fáil, chances are homeless might reduce, or it might just contract slightly, but the developers and the builders are going to get rich. You know, so
that cuts all round.
Yeah. You know, well, their plan so far, Fianna Fáil's plan is can throw money at the developers and they'll fix everything.
Well, they don't have the plan. Actually, their plan has been to actually just stand by it and watch it devolve, and hope that will actually be the crux that gets them back into power.
Like I understand when Fine Gael come on and they say, look, you can't go from 0 to 30,000 houses. Okay, and I'm leaving apart all the arguments that you've been there for 7 fucking years. We'll leave apart those arguments. But what you can do, and what you can do, which is entirely within the gift of the party and entirely within Leo Varadkar's gift, is to say there's a housing emergency. And that then changed the fiscal dynamics. Am I right, Tony?
That's what I've spoken about for a long time. The language matters. If you decide in the EU constitution, because it's debt to GDP ratio, and Paddy, you're aware of this, because this is what Labour were held over a barrel and said, debt to GDP ratio, we need to get to 3%.
Yeah.
And they're obsessed with that. And if you can turn around to them and say, well, actually, it says in the EU constitution that there's nothing to stop the state acting to defend its citizens in an emergency. So if we use that, that's why they're so adamant that they won't say.
But you've got to see what obstacle is there to a Fine Gael government saying there is a housing emergency? It's not like there's not a housing emergency. It exists. It's in our faces. I mean, I would also go as far as to say there is probably. And this is awful, but the housing emergency is awful. But the health emergency? Wow. These things are going to implode this country.
Well, you say that I only was reading there tonight about a 94-year-old man that spent like a long time, like I think it was 10 hours on a trolley. Like that's not a way to actually treat a citizen of this country. Like, you know, it's, and like in my day job, I would represent health workers, so I'd have a good bit of knowledge on the ED crisis and what's happening in A&Es and things like that. And you know, see, the great irony of all of this is that the winter, like this happens every January.
Mm-hmm.
Like, surely to God, we can put into train like plans to stop this from happening, and it's down to bed capacity. Really, it's not, and it's down to there are shortages of health staff in our ED department as well. But it's that whole thing, and it goes back to what, like, I think this podcast essentially is about, which is joining up the dots on society, on our economy. And it's like, why can't governmental departments and ministers that have paid astronomical amounts of money join up the dots on these things and actually plan them out? Now, I know from the HSC's Twitter page and things like that, that they had a big kind of promotion on the winter flu jab, and they did really kind of try and show a bit of leadership on it in their defence. But there wasn't actual political will to actually put those extra beds in there. Because
there hasn't been for
a long time.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
You look at the like Mary Harney, who was the Minister for Health, that made caused massive damage in our health service in terms of the privatisation of beds and things like that, and moving to a more kind of privatised model of healthcare,
Actually,
being rewarded with the Chancellor's of UL today.
Did you say to me that stuff was moved into private hospitals?
Yeah,
We're being moved to private hospitals.
I saw that in Cork yesterday. Yeah.
Now, whether that, you know, I've said for a long time that the health service in this country has been engineered to fail.
Well, that's like Naomi Klein stuff.
We're back to Naomi Klein and Noam Chomsky when you have the defund programs to make everything else seem like the only alternative option.
Yeah, but with that, right, before we go on to the next part, like, Fine Gael had a plan for that with public service, or with public transport, and you saw it like through the bus Éireann dispute that we had there last year, with the underfunding of bus Éireann and the underfunding of Irish Rail, to try and set them up to fail. And you know, that's something that we need to be very, very wary of as well. You know,
how do we solve the problems in this country, Tony? You know, look at the rent today. Look what happened. We got those figures that rent is climbing in Ireland 6 times faster than anywhere else in the EU. I mean, they're more afraid of multinationals. We had this. Your head would explode. You turn around and you go, how can we have rents rising at this level? This isn't like Paddy was talking about his brother having to go to Australia. I heard a teacher on the radio today talking about moving to Dubai. I saw an article during the week where they talked about co-living being the answer to young professionals. And I had someone when I brought it up online, people came at me and said, well, I was in London once and this was a way to go. And I thought, yes, London has is it 12 million people or something? We're in a country of 4.5 million people, and we have the space to accommodate obviously millions more. But did multinationals go into the government recently and say, you've got to solve this housing problem for our employees?
Yeah, because I think if you scare off the that seems to be the Fine Gael MO and the Fianna Fáil MO. If you scare off the multinationals, like, the whole country will implode in itself. So if, you know, the great irony would be if these great companies that don't pay any kind of corporation tax in this country are the ones that actually solve the renting and housing crisis. That would be a very, very sad irony.
But it speaks to us being very, very complacent as a people. We are awfully complacent. I mean, where else in Europe would they get away with that?
I'd say our greatest weakness was mostly some of our greatest strength, because the simple fact is we came out of a bailout quicker than I think the UK did it quicker in the 70s than we did it, but we're pretty much the benchmark for coming out of it, and we did that on the basis of Irish people just getting on with it.
Yeah.
Right, and that we deserve. We did. That's, again, will you say it's apathy, and it's also a strength where you can actually keep going.
I completely disagree with you. It's not a strength. People are shell shocked. People are. It's like they've been on a battlefield. The bombs dropping all around them. They don't have it within them to fight. We saw with water that there was enough people there to make a stand, and there is enough people there to make a stand on housing and homeless. Like, I don't for a second believe that all Fine Gael voters are such bad bastards that they will keep voting Fine Gael, even stepping over people on the street. They'll come to a stage where they'll say, okay, I might be Fine Gael, but I'm not that much of a bastard.
I don't know, it's quite questionable there, man.
No.
Never underestimate your man's greed.
There are good people in Fine Gael.
No, I know that. I know there are a lot of people, even in the current parliamentary party, there are people that are doing well. Like Kate O'Connell is someone that I would agree with on
a couple of issues,
on a couple of kind of social issues that she's come out on. She's been very, very strong on the Repeal the Aid Committee as well. You have to call out people that are doing good work as well, But I think it ties into, Annie used to always say, pain has no memory, and eating bread is sinful conduct. Two things she always said to me, and it kind of ties in with, the trauma that the country went through. I just think that unless we get to grips with this housing and homelessness and renting crisis, we are actually going to repeat the same mistakes again, and it is because of that. As you say, people are shell-shocked, they don't remember the pain that they were going through, and we're going to make those mistakes again. So I think it's incumbent on absolutely everybody that considers themselves to be on the progressive left of the spectrum, or to be an independent left, or a Republican Socialist, or whatever, Socialist Workers' Party people, Socialist Party, Labour Party people, Social Democrats, or the Soc Dems, or Greens, or whatever, to actually come together and try and provide that alternative to what Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil have to resolve the housing crisis, which is essentially pay off developers through tax breaks, or don't build it at all and let the market rule.
They're not particularly interested in building anything, anything but...
Well, if their mates can build it at a massive discount...
There's a lot of money to be made by just sitting on land at the moment.
Yeah. Like a site valuation tax as well, where people are just sitting on... property, is something that the Labour Party has actually advocated, in Dublin City Council, and it's something that I think the left need to get real on.
Fine Gael will tell you they've drafted it, but they just said we'll leave it till 2020.
Yeah.
And they have said that, and that's a matter of we have it ready to go, but we'll just give them a few years of a lead-in time. Should wait till
Yeah.
Well, I have to say, Paddy, look, thanks for coming on. We could keep going on about houses forever, but look, the real important stuff. Have you put names yet for the bank?
No, we've got names. Yeah.
Martin and Tony are
I was told don't tell anyone the names.
You could do a sort of a combination, MTTM.
Yeah. My main obstacle is going to be to try and
Martin if it's a girl, Tony if it's a boy.
Well, that's it. Yeah, that's it. Or maybe Kelly or something like that if it's a girl, you know what I mean? Or Brendan for a boy or something.
There we go.
Or Frank, even after Frank, the great man.
I think we both, when you were telling us earlier, we both gave you the same advice. We both gave you the same advice. What do you do before you have your first child? Sleep now, because you will never sleep like it again, ever.
Yeah, I'll probably go quiet on Twitter now for the next 29 years.
Oh, no, you'll find yourself...
my final departure.
No. From you can. It's actually very handy to... You can hold and feed the baby if you sit properly with one arm with the bottle there, and you can tweet with the other hand. I've done it. It's actually it's possible.
It just wasn't his baby. Stop it.
Never mind.
I appreciate the advice and for having me on as well. And you're doing great work.
Are you kidding me? No, delighted.
We are very happy because you are a true lefty, Paddy. You are a true lefty.
Paddy, I referred to you at the opening as someone who I've had little verbal jousts with, but I haven't to say always had the greatest respect for you. And
you and I have been at loggerheads before on Twitter, and we've always solved everything amicably. Everything we've done.
Are we going to have another bet on the general election? We go fiver again.
Yeah, we'll go fiver again.
After the budget.
Oh, before the budget, without doubt, before the budget. There's another fiver on.
Look, but I think that's a nice note to leave it at. That they're not officially at loggerheads, but and I have to say, Martin, you were absolutely cantankerous to the nth degree. Well done.
I got the royal treatment.
Yeah. Fair play to you, Paddy. Really appreciate it.
And best of luck to your wife. Tell her we were asking for.
That's
Thanks
fantastic.
Very much. Thank you.
Again, guys, thanks for listening. Remind you can subscribe on iTunes, SoundCloud, wherever you get your podcast from. Listen, I know we went on about Simon McGarr blowing it out of the water. But do go on, give us a few reviews, because we're actually still lingering around that bloody top 10 position, and it's an achievement for Paddy will testify 2 Egypts with an iPad.
And a tortoise.
And
of
a
course.
tortoise.
And this is literally like a shack. It's very, very impressive. Very,
Keep an eye on the website echochamberpod.com. All our previous podcasts are there. You can send us an email to the echochamberpod@gmail.com or follow us on Twitter at echochamberspod. Thanks so much, folks. Thank you.